Foreign Secretary David Miliband, who is seen by many as a possible future Labour leader, has urged his party to back a second referendum on leaving the European Union before it's too late. Writing in the New Statesman magazine, he says the election of President Trump has put global security centre stage and makes Brexit a reckless act. Well, to discuss whether he's got the right approach, I'm joined by the co-founder of Our Future, Our Choice, Lara Spirit, and the Labour donor and chairman of Labour Leave, John Mills. And I should say there's also much talk about a recent YouGov poll which shows that by 44% to 36%, the British people say they would like a say on the final deal. However, by 45 to 39%, they say they don't, at this stage, want a second referendum. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so, I mean, the wording, I think, in this is incredibly important. But, yeah, I think this morning the poll showed that actually maybe we are at a turning point in terms of public opinion, because the fact that there is now an 8-point lead among people who would like a final say.
A final say, but not a referendum. How does that add up?
Yeah, well, I think there just needs to be more clarity as to actually what that would be. And I think the issue is that within the terms, people think that if you say referendum, that you're not taking into account what David Miliband has said, which is that the world is a very different place now to what it was 2 years ago, and that Brexit will look very different to what it would when we voted on it.
What do you say to a second say or even a second referendum?
Well, I don't think you can go on and on having referendums about this. We had a referendum, there was a clear decision taken, and I think the British people want to live with that and get on with it.
But they do want to say. I mean, maybe they don't have confidence that Britain is going to secure a deal that's going to be in their interest.
Well, I think there are great difficulties about having a say, and unless you keep on having referendums, which is not the way we tend to run our affairs, I think the final decision will in fact be taken by Parliament. And that will be the way that the British people have some sort of opportunity, by putting pressure on their MPs, to determine what happens.
Do you understand why there seems to be a certain amount of cold feet, I suppose, as these negotiations go on? I mean, does it look to you like a great deal is emerging?
Well, I think the deal is going to be a compromise, which is probably not going to keep anybody wholly happy, but won't be regarded by anybody as being a major disaster. But, I mean, if you look at the polls, it depends. I agree with Lara. It depends very much what you ask, the answers that you get. But one thing that does seem to be really clear about the polls is that most people accept the result of the referendum that took place in June 2016 and want Britain to get on with it and get the best deal that they can.
I mean, it doesn't seem to be that much evidence that public opinion is really shifting towards thinking it prefer to remain.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that over the coming months we are going to see even more of a shift. And actually, there has...
It's not shifting. I mean, the headline figure, the poll was 52-48 to leave.
But, I mean, this morning, an 8-point lead among people who would like some sort of say. And I think it speaks absolute volumes in saying that, you know, we're from a youth campaign. And what we hear time and time again is that young people especially do not feel as if they've had a say in how these negotiations are going, or in any case in how Brexit will pan out. And so I think it's entirely reasonable. And I think David Miliband's article made it incredibly clear that the world is a very different place to what it was when we voted on this issue. And so it's an entirely logical conclusion that we therefore give it back to the people. And it's an incredibly democratic thing to do. Give it back to the people. Give them the say on how...
I mean, how is the world different? I mean...
Well, I mean, as David Miliband's panned out...
We've got Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, we've got Donald Trump. During the referendum campaign, we were told, you know, the trade deal with the US was this holy grail, you know, the big win for Brexit. And actually, you know, what nobody was to know was that, you know, Donald Trump was going to be in the White House. And so all of these things, you know, and the recent Russia attack, for example, I think just makes it incredibly clear that we need our European partners now more than ever.
What do you say to that?
Well, I think that it's interesting that the European partners that we've got have rallied round very strongly over...
But doesn't that, to a certain extent, invalidate the case for leaving the EU, that Mrs May today, she's in Scandinavia, she, as you say, rallied the European Council. I mean, what have we got against them?
Well, I think that we want to have our relationship with Europe on an intergovernmental basis rather than as part of a big political organisation. And that was a decision, really, that was taken in 2016. But that doesn't stop us cooperating with our European friends on all these sorts of issues, like Syria, like what's happening with Russia, at the moment, and I very much hope that will all continue.
There's no problem, really.
I think there's definitely a problem, and I think it's naive to think that we would have had as much cooperation. I mean, Theresa May was able to go straight to this summit, address them straight away, and I think that it is no coincidence that we've had this attack on our soil at the time when our two foreign policy pillars, you know, the USA and the European Union, are crumbling in front of our eyes. I think it's no coincidence at all.
But mightn't that just be mischief by the Russians as we try and adapt a United Kingdom for the 21st century rather than one for the 20th?
Well, OK, potentially, but I personally think that a United Kingdom for the 21st century should have the European Union and should have...
Should be a member of the United States of Europe?
Oh, my gosh. Well, you know, yes.
Yes.
Should be a member of...
Of the United States of Europe?
No, well, yeah, I mean, as in the European Union.
Well, I mean, the European Union, some say, I think Mr Mills would say that its ultimate ambition is to have a form of federation. That's certainly something which some of its leaders have talked about, and that was one reason why people voted to come out.
Definitely, but I think that, personally, the only way for us to actually talk about these things is to be within the European Union, and I think it's incredibly important in this situation that everybody has a say on what the European Union will look like and what our Brexit will look like.
Well, yes, but I mean, if you look at the wider point that David Miliband was making, which was that the West isn't doing very well, I'm not at all sure that's much to do with whether we're in the European Union or not. I think this has got a lot more to do with the fact the East is doing much better economically than we are, that we've got very low levels of investment and the growth is very low, and people aren't getting wage increases, and this is producing a huge amount of discontent. These seem to me to be really key issues.
OK. So there's something you agree with David Miliband on, then?
Well, I do agree that the West is slipping,
right,
but I don't think I really agree with him about why that's happening.
OK, well, I'll leave it there. Thank you both very much indeed.